Welcome to our last instruction piece for Romeo and Juliet. Your assignment today is going to be to listen to this and make notes. And then I'm going to want to see your notes. And then we will talk about stickman figures at a different video. So what I want to do today is talk to you about the rest of Act 3 and then 4 and then 5. I'm just going to kind of go back a little bit where we already were just to get you in the right place for continuing. Romeo and Juliet are very, very upset about having been Romeo having been banished. And so they both want to die. They just don't see how anything can work out for them, which is, everybody knows this is totally ridiculous, but we have to do this in order to have a fun story, right? So anyway, Juliet's dad thinks that she should get married so that she can quit grieving for Tybalt. He doesn't understand that she's not grieving for Tybalt. So he agrees for that. And then they spend their wedding night together. And let's go back to that. Lord Capulet tells her that she's going to marry Paris in 2 days, and she doesn't want to do that. She's very upset. So she tells Friar Lawrence that she wants to go make a confession, and she asks him for a remedy, and that's where we got to. All right. Now, Friar Lawrence does have a remedy, and so what we're going to read here is some foreshadow, and it's pretty interesting. I think you're going to like it. So Juliet says, okay, Friar Lawrence, I will do whatever you say will work, because there's so many scary things that I'd rather do than marry Paris. I want to be with Romeo, so please get me out of this marriage. So she says, oh, bid me leap rather than marry Paris from off the battlements of any tower. So she says she would rather jump off a tall building than marry Paris. She says, or I can walk in thievish ways, or bid me lurk where serpents chain. Oops, there's a typo there. Where serpents are, or chain me with roaring bears. So that's two different things she doesn't want to do. I'll go back and fix that for the next time. And she says, or hide me nightly in a charnel house. And she's charnel house is where dead people lie, right? And she says, or covered me quite with dead men's rattling bones, with reeky shanks and yellow chapless skulls, or bid me go into a new-made grave. Now, all this is just amazing foreshadow, because all these things are actually going to happen. She is going to be in a new-made grave, and hide me with a dead man in his shroud. Things that to hear them told have made me tremble, and I will do it without fear or doubt, to live an unstained wife to my sweet love. So she basically says that she would just as soon be in a grave with dead people, and that is exactly what is going to happen. So then Friar Lawrence tells her his plan, and I'm going to read it to you. First of all, he tells her that she needs to go and beg her father's forgiveness for refusing to marry Paris, to be really sorry and agree to marry him. And that's what she does. And this is what Friar Lawrence says. Tomorrow night, look that thou lie alone. In other words, the nurse, we're talking about the nurse, she needs to not be there. Let not the nurse lie with thee in thy chamber. They often slept in the same room. Take thou this vial meaning a place like a little bottle, and this distilled liquor drink thou off. When presently through all thy veins shall run a cold and drowsy humor, for no pulse shall keep his native progress, but surcease. No warmth, no breath shall testify thou livest. The roses in thy lips and cheeks shall fade, to paly ashes the eyes' windows fall. Like death, when he shuts up the day of life, each part deprived of supple government, shall stiff and stark and cold appear like death. And in this borrowed likeness of shrunk death, borrowed likeness, she's going to appear dead. Thou shalt continue 42 hours, and then awake as from a pleasant sleep. So he tells her, take this potion, and you will sleep for 42 hours, and you'll appear as though you are dead. Your heart rate is going to slow down. Your eyes will be closed. No warmth. Your body will be cold. It won't appear that you're breathing, but you won't be dead. And so Friar then says, and then when the bridegroom comes in the morning to rouse thee from thy bed, thou art thou dead. Then as the manner of our country is, in thy best robes uncovered on the bier, thou shalt be borne to that some ancient vault where all the kindred of the Capulets lie. In the meantime, against thou shalt awake. So basically, Paris is wanting to marry her, and then when he comes for the marriage, they're going to find out that she's dead, even though she's not. And then Friar Lawrence says this is important. He says, shall Romeo by my letters know our drift? Now you've heard, you catch my drift? You've heard that little saying. Well, that comes from Shakespeare, and we've missed so many words that we could talk about that Shakespeare invented. But this is a saying that comes from him. He says, and he'll know our drift. He'll understand what our plan is. So he's going to send him a letter. And hither shall he come, and he and I will watch thy waking, and that very night shall Romeo bear thee hence to Mantua, and this shall free thee from this present shame, if no inconstant toy nor womanish fear abate thy valor in the acting it. In other words, unless you're too chicken to do this plan, this is what we'll do. And Juliet says, oh, give it to me, give me. Oh, tell me not of fear. And Friar says, hold, get you be gone, be strong and prosperous. In this resolve, I'll send a friar with speed to Mantua with my letters to thy lord. So he's sending another priest with a letter that Romeo is supposed to get, which will tell him of the plan. Meanwhile, Juliet's father plans her wedding. And this is, not a pleasant thought for Juliet, but she has a plan. She apologizes to her dad and says she will agree to marry Paris. Lord Capulet is so happy. He's even agreeing to do the things that maybe a woman might do for a wedding. He is so happy about the upcoming event. And Juliet then tells the nurse to leave her alone that night so she can pray. And Juliet prepares then to take the potion, but she's fearful. And then comes some more foreshadow. Juliet thinks aloud. And this speech, when you think aloud in a play and you think your feelings out loud, you're by yourself on the stage, only your thoughts. It is for the audience to know what you're thinking. And this is called a soliloquy. Think solo, you flying solo. So she's by herself and she's speaking her mind so that we can know what she's thinking. And she says, what if this mixture did not work at all? I be married then tomorrow morning? Well, here Juliet then considers that she wants to kill herself with a knife, but then she chooses to lay the knife down. And then she says, she thinks, what if it be a poison which the friar subtly has ministered to have me dead, lest in his marriage he should be dishonored because he married me to Romeo, before to Romeo. So she's afraid maybe the friar wants her to die because he knows he's going to be in big, big trouble because he already married her without permission. And then here's more of her soliloquy. She says, how if when I am laid into the tomb, I wake before the time that Romeo come to redeem me? That's a fearful point. So she's afraid that she's going to wake up in the tomb before he gets there. Shall I not be, if I can't even read this, let me make it bigger. Make it bigger. Shall I not be stifled in the vault to those whose foul mouth no healthsome air breathes in? In other words, what if I can't breathe? What if I can't even catch my breath and I die there strangled before Romeo comes? Or if I live, is it not very like the horrible conceit of death and night, together with the terror of the place, as in a vault, an ancient receptacle where for this many hundred years the bones of all my buried ancestors are packed, where bloody Tybalt, yet but green in earth, lies festering in his shroud, where, as they say, at some hours in the night spirits resort. So she's afraid that she's going to see Tybalt. And she says, alack, alack, it's not like that I, so early waking, what with the loathsome smells and shrieks like mandrakes torn out of the earth, that living mortals hearing them run mad. So she is thinking that she's going to hear shrieking. Like if you remember Harry Potter, there was a mandrake and it's like this plant and you pull it out of the ground and it shrieks and makes a noise. And that's what she's kind of afraid that she's going to hear. And then she says, what if I wake up and shall I not be distraught, environed with all these hideous fears, and madly play with my forefathers' joints? What if I start playing with the bones of my forefathers? And pluck the mangled Tybalt from his shroud, and in this rage with some great kinsman's bone, as with a club, dash out my desperate brains. Oh, look, methinks I see my cousin's ghost, seeking out Romeo, that did split his body upon a rapier's point. Stay, Tybalt, stay. Romeo, I come. This do I drink to thee. And then she takes the potion. Yay, I guess. It's going to cause her death. All right, let's see. So now, let me pull this down a little bit. We have the Capulet family has a funeral for Juliet because they have discovered her dead. And she's not really dead, but they think she is. So now she lies in the tomb. She's asleep and she's awaiting Romeo. But wait, what's going to happen now? The Black Death. Now, we can really relate to this because we're in the middle of a pandemic. But at that time, the Black Death was just killing so many people. And so if you were ever exposed to it around people who had it, they would quarantine you by law. Well, that's what happened to the friar's messenger. He somehow got exposed and they quarantined him for 24 hours. So he was not able to communicate with Romeo. And then in Mantua, Romeo hears that Juliet has died. So he goes to the tomb to see her, not knowing that she's alive. So before arriving, though, he has obtained a poison for himself so that he can die with Juliet. But Paris is also in the tomb. He wants to mourn Juliet as well. And then Romeo and Paris fight, and Paris dies. And then Juliet appears dead. So as Romeo looks down on her, he doesn't really recognize that she seems to be coming back to life. He thinks she's dead. So it just didn't really occur to him that the reason she looked so beautiful was because she really wasn't dead at all. Romeo drinks then the poison that he brought and he dies. Juliet wakes up, sees him die, and with a dagger, she kills herself. And she says, oh, happy dagger. So she personifies the dagger, the knife, and that's a very famous line. And then at the very end, Prince Aeschylus asks Friar Lawrence, he says, what happened here? And all the family is there, and everyone wants to know what has happened here. And even Lady Montague has died because of the stress that has caused her heart to fail. So then Friar Lawrence explains in a monologue what happened. He actually summarizes all the events beginning with Romeo and Juliet's marriage. Everyone thinks, oh, what a tragedy this is. And then so the Montagues and Capulets, they repent and they decide, we have caused too much pain and we're going to make up and we're not going to hate each other anymore. But nothing can really change the catastrophe that has occurred. And I have these two words bolded because a monologue, similar to a soliloquy, but a monologue is when one person is in a conversation with others. Others are listening. And the monologue then is that speech that a person makes where nobody else really talks. So they talk and they talk and they talk and other people are listening. That's a monologue. One person, one, is speaking in, we know the word dialogue when two or more are talking with one another. Well, monologue is one person speaking who is monopolizing the conversation, if you will. And then the word catastrophe is highlighted here because the very last act of a tragedy, and that's what this is a tragedy, is called the catastrophe because the reason it's a tragedy is because something horrible happens in the end. The generally there's a death at the end of the main character, or something maybe even more horrific than death might happen, but it's always a catastrophe at the end. And then the very last two lines of the play are, for never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. So that is Romeo and Juliet in a nutshell. I hope you understand and have understood what we've done. Although we've missed some of the fun parts of the play, you definitely have been given the gist of the play. And I hope you also are watching Romeo and Juliet, or the 1968 version of Romeo and Juliet, because this is how you're going to really understand the play. You'll see some of the nuances. You'll see some of the comedy. I think you'll understand it better, and you'll appreciate the language that we've been reading. All right, so I'm gonna exit this meeting. I hope you have a really good day. This week we're also going to talk about stick figures to see if we can't get a little bit more points going on here. So y'all have a great day, and we'll talk soon. Bye. Right. Well, maybe.